Everybody, thank you so much for coming here. My name's Kevin Morley. We are here today to look at this concept of concepts, big thinking. Yeah? One of the major pushes within the new IB program, both at MYP and DP levels, is going to be the idea of concepts. And what I would like to do today is take you through three specific items. First of all, the why. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need a concept-based syllabus in language teaching? And then the what. What are the specific concepts that we, as language teachers, are expected to teach and allow our students to understand? And then the big question, how? How is it all to be done? Normally you start with the what, but being perverse, I've started with the why. This is me as a language teacher. Let's just date this, carbon date this around 2010. Yeah, there am I. Yeah, looking at a new syllabus for language B, and I know I want to teach some text. I want to teach some themes. I want to teach my students to be able to communicate in English. And there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, because the light of the tunnel says, in 2 years' time, these guys have got to do an exam. Now, I'm fortunate today because I've got living proof, as it were, yeah, that I actually managed to teach somebody something, because I'm a former student in the audience. Now, this was my aim, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job. But I always had this nagging doubt. What are my students actually learning? Yeah? I'm preparing them to take an exam. I think I'm doing a pretty good job of giving them enough competence in English to take that job, I'll say that one again, to pass their exams. But surely there's more to education than this. But I was never quite certain what this mysterious thing was. So, as I became an author of textbooks, I had to question myself what I was doing. And the two guiding principles I've used were to look, first of all, at the fundamentals. Look at the IB mission statement. What are we as educators supposed to be doing? We are supposed to be developing inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring people. Well, I knew I was creating knowledgeable students. Were they caring? Were they inquiring? I wasn't so certain. And looking further at the mission statement, I was expecting my students to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. Now, I know as a language teacher, my job is to teach intercultural understanding and respect. A more peaceful world? How on earth am I, as a language teacher, supposed to fulfill that mission? So that was one thing. Second thing was simply pragmatics. The students who are now in MYP and DP, I know are going to be in a completely different world to the one in which we live. Yeah? They're going to be faced with completely different challenges. They are going to be facing completely different methods of working, organizational structures that we often have not had to face. I mean, as teachers, we tend to work in institutions. I know some of this because of my second career as an author. I'm an independent entity now. I have to bring skills to bear that I did not have to bring as a teacher. I have to do things, I have to organize myself. Yeah. I've even had to form my own little company. Things that I never had to do as a teacher. Yeah. And we have to teach our kids that they're going to be out there in this big, wide world. That's what I look at my daughter's generation. She's 30 now, yeah? And the challenges that she and her generation face already are far, far different to the ones that I grew up with. So, continuing my research as a textbook writer, went back to the core principles again. There's a document out there which says what is an IB education, and it teaches us that we have to do and think about our learners, we have to think about our teaching methods and learning methods, we have to develop our teaching within global contexts, and we have to have significant content. These are the 4 principles. So let's have a quick look at these. Student-centered learning and inquiry. A little story. Some of you may know that I was the co-author of the last English B textbook published by OUP. I was in this very strange position of teaching using my own textbook to my students. Yeah? And I have to think to myself, where do I start using my own textbook? Am I going to start with chapter 1? Didn't seem very motivating. Yeah? So, just in the spirit of inquiry, I gave my students the previous Language B syllabus, you know, with all those core and options topics. And I said to them, here's the book. You figure out, you have to cover, using the book, your core topics. You have to choose 2 options. You have to choose the topics from this book which interest you most. You have to tell me which topics you want to do in the first year of the course. You tell me which ones you want to do in the second year of the course. Yeah? In other words, you, the students, are going to take ownership of my work. Yeah? And I have to confess, it worked like a dream. Yeah? Because they were then motivated. And then they could tell me, actually, there is other stuff we'd like to do as well. So they were building their own course. It became a genuine joint journey, as it were. ATLs. I had this conversation at lunchtime, and we were talking about it. About, you know, as an adult, you apply for thousands of, well, in my case, it was thousands because nobody would employ me. But many jobs, you go for job interviews. How many of you ever been asked about the content of your second year course at university? Yeah? Does anybody care that I actually know about the economy of Spain in the 16th century? Is anybody interested in my knowledge of Middle High German poetry? Answer, no. What employers want to know is, can you think? Can you communicate? Can you organize yourself? Can you work with other people? And can you actually find things out which are valuable and present them in a way which is useful to somebody? So in other words, the ATLs are actually probably in the long term more important than your course content for your students in the long term. Third principle, global context. Coming back to building a peaceful society. Yeah. There they are. Now, as language teachers, isn't it more interesting to build courses thematically around these big ideas which affect us in the future, which will affect our students in the future? We are allowing our students to invest in their lives, in their futures, and at the same time learn a language. We call this talk Big Thinking. Concepts and concept-related learning is about having big ideas and manipulating these big ideas. But at the same time, if we follow the principle of inquiry, in order to examine these concepts, we have to ask even bigger questions. And we have to get the students to ask those bigger questions. And more importantly, they have to come up with answers. And these are what I call, and have been called elsewhere, enduring understandings. The things that you take away after everything else has been forgotten. So, why are we doing this? Because it's there, it's the IB mission, we're supposed to be doing this. Yeah? We are actually helping our students become global citizens, useful citizens, engaged citizens, and face the challenges of employment in the 21st century. We want to produce a student-centred, skills-based course for our students. We want them to be able to engage in real issues, not pretend ones. And we want to make our students wiser. We want them to be able to navigate the world in which they live. We want them to be able to navigate the target cultures of the languages that they are learning. This is essential. So that's the first question. Why are we doing this? Why do we need concept-based learning? Okay, so now let's do the easier question. The what. What are the big ideas used in the MYP and the DP? Those of you who are familiar with the MYP program will recognize this list of 6 broad areas. Yeah. So at one level, our concepts are these 6 ideas which sort of divide up the world in which we live. Yeah? Identities and relationships, being able to describe ourselves and other people. Orientation in time and space, being able to use narratives and understand narratives. Personal and cultural expression, scientific and technical innovation. We can explore these themes, and at the same time we can teach kids critical language and to decide what is important and what isn't. We can teach kids to use evaluative language and explanation. globalizational sustainability, fairness and development. Hello? Isn't this what it's really all about? Can we actually find things in our language courses which question the idea of fairness, which look at sustainability, which confront issues connected with globalization? Because these are the things which will really matter. As well as all that, there's a second level of concepts which are to do with individual subjects. Now in MYP, they talk about key concepts, and the ones in red, connections, creativity, culture and communication, which is nicely alliterative, are the ones connected to language acquisition. But this great list of concepts are the ones which are done throughout the MYP course. And these key concepts crop up in other subjects as well. So students are learning about these concepts, not only in language acquisition, but will come at them from other angles in other subjects as well. And then, all these related concepts which deal with aspects of language. You might argue there's rather a lot there. You might think, and I would say you're absolutely right. But that's what they are. Now, it's the IB. So, we like to make life a little bit complicated. We don't like people to be able to sort of like have a cushy, easy life. So what we'll do is we'll have two sets of vocabulary, two completely different lexes for dealing with essentially the same ideas. Yeah? So MYP and PYP, you have cross-curricular concepts. In the DP, in the new course, you will have also concepts, but they will be more subject-specific. The MYP likes to talk about global context. The DP, the new DP, will talk about themes, but essentially they are the same thing. The MYP has key concepts and related concepts, and conceptual, and in DP, conceptual understandings. But in essence, they're exactly the same thing. Don't ask me why I didn't write this stuff. So, now you can throw things at me, because I was on the committee that came up with this list. And I was not the only person who in this room who came up with that list either. Yeah? So the new DP will consist of these 5 themes. And as you can see, once again, they are broadly covering the major areas of human endeavour. The one which might be a little bit tricky there is human ingenuity, which happily combines notions to do with artistic ingenuity and also scientific ingenuity. Rather than that long list, the DP language-related concepts are reduced to 5. Anybody interested in the maths? That's what they look like. Those are the numbers. Now, the bit you've all been waiting for. How? Backwards design. You know the old thing about, the great thing about backwards design. It's like planning a holiday. Which do you plan first? Where you're going or how you're getting there. Like, well, managed to find this room, yeah? That first, and then you figure out how you get here. Same with backwards design and big thinking and language acquisition. What are we trying to do? How are we going to measure what we've done and what the students have learnt from the process? And only then do we start figuring out what we're going to teach. As opposed to me in the dark, where I had all these great ideas about what I wanted to teach, and then, oh yeah, and at the end of it, they're going to take the exam. Yeah. Defining goals. This is really, really important from a conceptual point of view. We're working with these key concepts, global concepts. Yeah. We have a look at those. But then, in concept-based learning, it's equally important to think, what do we want our students to learn from this? Not in terms of passing an exam necessarily, that's very, very useful, but how will that information help them in the real world? Yeah. What bits of wisdom can they take away from this particular module? I'll just throw that one on the screen. You know, think for yourself for a moment. What global concept could be represented by that? What language-related concepts could you teach related to that? What would you like your students to learn from starting that inquiry? My one chart, very, very quickly, as you can see, global context equals theme in the DP. The big thinking idea is to create a global perspective using these themes and global contexts. MYP, using the Malala example, you might look at fairness and development. In the new DP, you might look at the concept of sharing the planet. That then feeds into your decisions about what key concepts or related concepts for MYP you might want to do. And in the DP, what conceptual understandings you might want to select, knowing that over the course of your course, so to speak, you want to give equal coverage to each of these. So, I picked on audience as my example simply because it occurs both in the MYP and the DP. Yeah. And then, and only then, do we get into the actual topic of the thing. Yeah? What actual topic are we going to teach? What research question are we going to pose? Which we can pose, but you can also, even more excitingly, throw out to your students and say, well, this guy who wrote the textbook, he's asked you this. Can you think of a better question? Can you think of a more interesting question? There's nothing wrong with, nothing is written down in stone. Yeah? And I talk of the guy who wrote the stuff. Yeah? Adapt to your purposes. And as you can see here, yeah, a couple of leading questions which could come out of our Malala. In case you hadn't guessed, it's an avocado. My drawing skills are somewhat limited, but now, the avocado, to me, is my metaphor for learning. Yeah? Think about an avocado. It has these three layers: the skin, the flesh, the kernel. Let's be honest. When our kids leave the classroom, 85%, 95% of the stuff they've done in that class is forgotten the moment they walk out that door. Yeah? It's the husk. But, depending on how successful we are, there is some flesh in there. There is some sustenance, some nutrition. There is some food in there that they can actually digest, use, and hang on to. And with a bit of luck, it will help them in their summative assessments, yeah, to pass whatever the module is, whatever tests we decide to give with MYP, summative assessments in MYP, or what we, formative assessments with DP, no, our dreaded practice exams at various points throughout the year. But I would say to you this, the real kernel is how do our students apply what they have learnt, the concepts they have developed, how do they apply it to the real world? Can they actually transfer it to their other subjects? Is it useful in maybe in their social service program? And even more excitingly, 3 or 4 years down the line, 20 years down the line, is there anything of this that they will take away and be able to transfer and be useful in their lives? Which brings you back to the ATL thing again. Now, the more cynical amongst you say, yeah, but we're language teachers, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff to do as well. So we've got all our text types to teach, we need to do language acquisition exercise, we need to teach our kids to communicate, we need to do some target language, formative assessments, the whole thing. How are we going to fit in all these concepts into this? And I would say to you, I'd throw it back at you and say, it's really easy. Because if it wasn't easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. Yeah? Input, process, output, classic language acquisition. There's nothing very radical about this. But all I would say is, within the modules that you create, you can introduce the concepts. As we've said in our input, get in there, process them, and then output them. Now I'm going to use another food metaphor in a moment. Yeah? Input. Themes, specific concepts, research question, and then the meat of the stuff, which is the text. The egg, if you think of a concept as an egg, it's hard on the outside and soft and gooey and very, very difficult to get hold of on the inside. Yeah? So as language teachers, we need to do our pre-reading, yeah, to get the kids to bring to the table what they already know. We have our research question, and then in our text handlings, we can make sure that we're asking micro questions, questions for micro understanding, exercises for micro understanding. Yeah? Small detail. Sticking with the egg metaphor. But once we've broken the shell of the thing and we want to do stuff with it, yeah, we can get them to discuss the concepts within the text. Role play it, negotiate, transform it. You know, sort of like, can you take Malala's speech to the UN and create a poster? Yeah. Can you transfer what Malala has said to your school situation? Yeah. There are lots and lots of things that you can do with a concept which still give you a context for language teaching as well. They're not two totally foreign things. They are essentially the same thing. And I'm going to stick with the egg metaphor one more time. Voila! Having cracked it open, having processed it in some way, then you cook it, which is the student's output. Yeah? They can do their oral work, their presentations, they can write a whole variety of text types, but are still within the concepts that we're trying to teach. Be it the global context, be it the subject specific. And of course, all the time they're using big thinking in terms of higher level processing skills, which has got to be useful. To summarize, that big thinking and concept-based education is not an imposition. It is a massively powerful tool to teach languages with. Yeah. Meaningful context, concrete. Abstract language, which is some of the more difficult things to convey when you're learning a language, become much easier if you have some concepts which you are talking about. You naturally develop a context in which to use more abstract levels of language. Networks of associations. The more you think, the more you learn a language. And I would leave you this final thought, almost final thought, enduring understandings. Yeah? You might actually teach your students something valuable about the world in which they live and the target culture they're investigating through language. Here are 3 enduring understandings. Yeah. Even if you haven't got anything else, just remember this, that the names may vary. MYP, DP are essentially doing the same thing in terms of concepts. It can be integrated easily into an input process output model of language learning. Finally, you'll be doing your students an enormous favour by helping them to prepare for the big mad world. And I thank you very, very much for coming and being an attentive audience.